Hello, everyone. This is Cameron Cowan here. I'm checking levels. This is the very first time we've ever live streamed the podcast. This is a new thing that I've been announcing. And I've been talking about that I was doing, and I was going to work out the technical issues and all this type of thing. I finally managed to do all of that. And now we're off and running. I'm checking right now to make sure that everything is working. We're going to get to the news. I promise. I don't have a control room, remember. I am only one Cameron. Just one. There's a lot of me, but only one Cameron. So I'm double checking to make sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to, and it does seem to be working. So if you're watching me on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or Twitter, all good. Everything is working, so we can jump right into the news. And it's been a long time since we've talked. I took off 4 months this summer past to just take a break. I needed a break. I had to have a minute. I was I haven't written all about this yet. I'm still adjusting camera angles. Again, we're working on technical issues. I will perfect this in time, I promise. I have not written about this. I have a post coming up called Big Trouble in Mental Healthville. And that post is about kind of like the changing state of my mental health. And I talked about this in some of the interviews over the break. I stopped writing in April, and then we did podcast episodes into June because I had booked out all of these guests. So, excuse me. So we had all that going, which was fantastic. And I was talking about that in March I had gotten diagnosed with autism. Ironically, I had my first appointment with the autism doctor the day before I started my Master's of Fine Arts program. And if you look in the books and writing category on CameronJournal.com, I've been talking about my MFA program and all the stuff that's been going on. And that's been good. It's been fantastic. It's been great. It's been tough. It's been hard. I've learned a lot, but we'll get to MFA in a minute. Sticking to autism. What has been going on is I've basically been understanding more about the autism world. In fact, I had Sarah Wofford, who is autistic, a person with autism, on the podcast. In fact, here's what's funny. I lost her episode. So I edited it, put it all together, everything, and I forgot to upload it. And so she's kind of like, hey, did my episode ever come out? And I'm kind of like, actually, your episode is the first lost episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. But it's up there now. And so you can listen to it, and we're kind of like, I'm still in the middle of getting evaluated when we had that conversation. And so so I'm, kind of looking to the future. And it's been one of the hardest, most difficult things ever. It's been the most helpful ever. It's made a lot of things in my life make sense. A lot of the difficulties, a lot of the issues, a lot of the problems, a lot of the things that haven't made any sense, a lot of the things where I've wondered why people act a certain way or treat me a certain way or don't like me as much as I think they should because I think I'm a great, cool guy, all this type of thing. But it has definitely been a journey. When I got into the autism journey, I thought there would be a lot of support, and I thought there would be a lot of things to do, tools to learn, like a group to join, things like all the things that like other mental health things have, like if you have borderline personality disorder, if you're bipolar or whatever have you. And I discovered with what we call late diagnosis autism, because it's normally diagnosed in children, none of that stuff was really available. And so a lot of it is just reaching out to the community. Um, I've learned more about autism from people I've met online, a couple Discord servers, than I ever have before. And that's a big shout out to my friend Pete Coogan, who has really, even though he was diagnosed around the same time I was, has really been guiding me through this process, with his research and his knowledge and his support and kind of understanding my brain, which is what really led to me to seeking out the autism diagnosis. Is I started watching people on YouTube who are autistic, and I'm kind of like, oh wow, they say the same things I do, they think like I do, and that never happens. Whoa. Like, and so it's like that's been a really cool journey, but it has also really reset my expectations for life. In fact, I was on the phone with Pete earlier, and I told him, I said, we live on the margins and the edge of society, because the sad reality is society doesn't really want us around. Like, that's part of it. It's like the society does not want us really involved. They don't understand us. We don't read the right social cues. We don't do the right things. There's all kind of this stuff involved in dealing with other people that just doesn't really make any sense to us. And or that we just don't do well because our neurology is different. And so that has made for me understanding that when it comes to what I can expect out of life, I really have to dial down the expectations. And there's a lot of people who talk about, oh, there's so many famous autistic people, and, they can accomplish so much, and, and you're smart and you're talented and all this type of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the problem. Being neurodivergent is hard enough. You add in racial issues, that makes it one step worse. You add in sexuality issues, and that leaves you really on the edges of society. Because I chose to be a triple minority this life, go me. And so that the opportunities that are open to you, and the ability to do and create your own future is much more limited than it might ordinarily otherwise be. And for someone like myself who has never thought that I couldn't do anything, and has lived an enviable life by some standards, the idea that I sort of have to take a step back, dial back, and look at things in terms of, is that going to work within my life, my neurology, how I am in the world, how I am with people, all these different factors, is wholly unfamiliar territory. And so, like I said, I'll be writing about some of these things more extensively in my post Big Trouble in Mental Healthville, which will be forthcoming. It's hard to write about, so I'm not going to make any promises as to when that's going to come out. It will come out, so keep an eye out for it. It'll be in the life category on CameronJournal.com. And so I kind of needed some time to process all of this. And I was also in the middle of my first semester of my MFA. It was not going well. And I was just really overwhelmed. So I took a step back. I basically took this part of the spring and summer off. And then I kind of have gotten things back up and running here in September, and I'm so happy that so many of you have stayed around. I meant to restart the weekly news podcast 3 weeks ago. And you guys have kind of bared with me as I've worked on scheduling and technology and getting the live stream ready and all this type of thing. And it's kind of been nerve-wracking because there's, been tech to figure out, and, there's like two different like I have one program that actually takes in the video that you're seeing, and then I have a distribution service that's sending it out to whatever service you're watching it on. So I had to get all that figured out. I had to test it. I had to make sure it was all going to work. I had to learn this new software as well, and it wasn't that complicated, but there was some YouTube videos to watch. There was some homework to do. And so it's just like, thank you all for staying with me while I figured out the whole live streaming thing. Now, if you're used to listening to the podcast on audio, on whatever platform you choose to listen on, worry not. The weekly news podcast will continue to appear in its audio only format. These videos will obviously be on the platforms they're broadcast on, with the exception of Twitter. Twitter does not save video like that, but like YouTube, for example, the video will be there. The nice thing about this is I can return to doing YouTube videos, which for those who've been with me a long time will remember the old the Cameron Cowan show, talk show on YouTube. I haven't really done videos since I closed the talk show in 2016. And so it's been like 5 years, and when I started doing the Cameron Journal, I was trying to figure out how to do video and all this type of thing. And when I did the talk show, I did 2 videos a week, 16 videos a month, and they basically took an entire day to shoot, another day to edit, and another day to render. And so I didn't want to go back to that schedule because it's not really in harmony with like working on my books or other things, or especially with the MFA, like other things going on. And so I was kind of figuring out like, well, how can I, what can I do that's video, but that's kind of not video? And that's when I came up with like live streaming the podcast, was so I could create video without having to make an extra effort. Now, I do have a couple video projects planned. I also have some audiobook versions of the books that I have out that I'm currently editing and cutting together. So those will be uploaded to the channel in due course. Again, I'm not making any promises on when that's going to be done, because I want to make sure that, we have the blog content and the news content that you've come to expect first. But I wanted to kind of let everybody know like that stuff is coming. And I do have some other video projects that I'm working on. So there might be some specific videos that are not tied to the weekly news podcast. And we'll go for that in due course. Now, it should be noted that if I do an interview with somebody, then my phone is blinking. I apologize for that, everybody. If I do an interview with somebody, those are going to be audio only. So the only thing being live streamed is the weekly news podcast. So if you want to hear interviews with authors and artists and people and all this type of thing, those are still going to be an audio only. So make sure to subscribe to the Cameron Journal podcast on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all the places. If you're listening to podcasts, I am there. So that's kind of the update with me. That's kind of what we're going on with here, which is good and lovely. We do have lots of great new content at thecameronjournal.com. You guys are eating well this week. I did a feature on why Family Guy will never win an Emmy. And then on Tuesday, I told a story, another travel story called Disaster in Port St. Lucie. I am slow writing a book called Life on the Road, which is kind of a compendium of all my crazy travel stories and all this type of thing. And so we're kind of slow writing it as a series of blog posts that eventually will become one day a book. And we've got 3 or 4 of them going in travel stories. So I'm working on a couple things about my various and sundry train journeys, where I've taken rail places. And so that's been a lot of fun. Hi, Corey. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. He's somebody that I've met on Twitter, and we've been talking and chatting. It's been a lot of fun. If you do have questions, comments, concerns, want to talk, want to hear me talk about a news story, you can get at me all over social media. Cameron Cowan on Twitter is where I'm most active. So if you want me to see something like right away, then definitely get at me on Twitter. Facebook, I'm not as fast at, but it's facebook.com/Cameron L. Cowan. And a lot of people interact with me on there. I will get to all your messages eventually. And then you can always find contact info and all these links at CameronJournal.com. And if you're listening to the audio version, I repeat these at the end. But that's I always enjoy talking to listeners, interacting with people, and sometimes even some of my listeners even become my friends, and so it's a lot of fun. So we have a really great community here around the Cameron Journal. We have a lot of new people who joined over the course of the pandemic. And so thank you, new listeners. Thank you for bearing with me during my breaks. I promise you I'm not going to take any crazy breaks until December, when I take 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. So you've got me for October, November, and the first 2 weeks of December, I promise. So, like I said, we have a great community here. It's growing. More and more people are interacting with me on like Twitter and other platforms and all this type of thing. And so it's it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We do good work here. So right now, though, we've had enough about me and enough about personal updates, all this type of thing. I know I haven't seen you in 4 months, but, we don't want to spend all of our time on that. There's been so much happening over the summer. I want to start with the most important piece of new news right now. Today, Congress did pass a budget extension continuing resolution to fund the government through December 3rd. However, the debt ceiling problem on October 18th, which is in about 19 days from now, is still pending. So even though Congress has authorized spending to the end of the year, avoiding a shutdown that would have started at midnight East Coast tonight, in about 2 hours from now, we still do not have more borrowing authority to actually finance that spending, because we spend more money than we take in, because we make smart financial decisions in this country. And so we are, so that piece is there, but we're still waiting on the debt ceiling to happen. And so that's kind of the next fight, as well as the Biden administration and congressional Democrats are still trying to figure out how to get the $3.5 trillion budget through, as well as a bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure spending bill. So there's a lot kind of moving forward. There's going to be some more important conversations happening over the next couple days, especially budget reconciliation, to get the budget fixed up, and then also to look at that $1 trillion, which, I mean, it's a lot of money. And right now, the whole thing really is being plugged up by Democrats in their own party. Most people know that it's been Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona who have been really holding things up as far as getting this spending to go through, and as far as making these things happen. Manchin had mentioned a few weeks ago that he wanted to have a quote-unquote strategic pause on the budget until 2022, and the Biden administration is looking for a political win and looking to get some things off the ground, and so now they're trying to come up with some sort of bill that he wants, but he still said he thinks it's just simply way too much money. We've spent $5 trillion on the pandemic. We certainly cannot spend another 3.5 on, the country. And obviously, progressives on the left are saying there's so much stuff in here that we've been waiting forever for. Things like universal pre-K, universal child care, all this type of thing. There's major, major social programs contained within the bill that have been on the progressive wish list for a long time. In addition to things like roads, bridges, and airports, many of whom haven't been touched. The last time we did any sort of major infrastructure was the Shovel Ready Jobs program after the recession, and those were state priorities of different things to do. This is far larger in scope. And the reality, if you've driven on roads lately, is our country's falling apart. Our bridges are old and creaking. Our roads are older and creakier. There are, the interstate system literally will be obsolete by the end of the decade. And so there's some major opportunities to get some stuff right. Obviously, things like universal pre-K, universal childcare is going to be a huge boon to working families. And the difficulty with a lot of these things is that, this money is not a handout to rich people, a la the Trump tax cuts that, added $6 trillion to the deficit. This is really for everyday Americans. This is really for working people. And the other important thing about the budget, which also has Republicans against it, is there's tax raises in there. Especially on people who earn over $400,000 a year, as well as corporate tax increases and changing the tax code to capture more, to be able to capture more income. And then also, you might have heard this floating around about how the IRS wants banks to keep better track of transactions going out of bank accounts. And rather than having the IRS be alerted of anything over $10,000, they want to lower that down to $600 to make sure that, we are, that everyone is paying the taxes that they're supposed to pay. So that is, that's kind of where we are with that situation. So like I said, spending is authorized, but we still have a debt ceiling fight. And given that, there's 19 days to do it, I wouldn't expect any alacrity from Congress at this juncture on that, because they have a couple weeks to kind of mess around with it. So it's going to be a little bit, I think they'll be able to get it together, but, it's Congress. We can't make any promises on these people. The other obviously major news story of the summer that I know a lot of people have asked me to talk about is the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. And this has been, I need to move my foot. This has been something that is at the same time both popular and unpopular. So the Afghanistan withdrawal began as an agreement that the Trump administration drew up with the Taliban, ironically enough, without the consultation of the U.S.-backed government in Kabul. And we arranged for a U.S. withdrawal, the dateline of which was supposed to be May 31st. We then negotiated an extension with them until August 31st. And obviously, the images of Afghanis crowded into cargo planes and people falling to their death, hanging on to the wheels of airplanes, is gut-wrenching and awful. And there were a lot of people who lampooned the Biden administration for, what happened and why it was an emergency and all this sort of thing. And ultimately, the kind of, as we've gotten some distance from it being in the moment and trying to get everybody out and evacuating people and closing the embassy, and the Taliban basically being able to retake over all of Afghanistan within days of our departure, as General Milley put it, it was a logistical success, but a strategic and optical disaster. Biden's popularity took a pretty big hit over Afghanistan, and the budget impasse that we've kind of talked about already definitely didn't help the situation. And so, it's tough times from a popularity poll perspective. People are expecting the Biden administration to do big things. Biden ran on big things. It's been 9 months, and so far, it hasn't gone well so far. And the Afghanistan thing kind of made this, things kind of look a bit inept. and the budget impasse and not being able to get this infrastructure thing through when your party controls both branches, both legislative branches of government and the executive, makes kind of things look even worse. And this is a man who said he wanted to be the new FDR. So, it is a difficult thing, because Afghanistan was a war that we started because of 9/11, even though we knew that Osama bin Laden was not in Afghanistan at the time. And it drug on for 20 long years. This is a war that's gone on so long that fathers who fought in Afghanistan sent their sons who enlisted to also fight in Afghanistan in the same barracks, at the same bases, in the same buildings. It is America's longest war, longer than Vietnam, and it has come at a tremendous cost. It was a $4 trillion boondoggle. Thousands are dead, many more wounded, many both physically and psychologically. And rather than try to stay and make it work or change course on the policy, the Biden administration made the correct move of pulling out of Afghanistan, and continuing on with the Trump agreement with the Taliban, mostly because Afghanistan, the situation had gone stagnant. The Afghanistan military was, despite the best training and all this type of thing, was not making any progress in being able to operate on their own without American consultants, or American troops or air support. Also, the Taliban were dug in, and the reality is that the Taliban is in a situation where they're at home, they're in their own country, they can wait. And anybody that studied the history of people invading Afghanistan knows that that's what happens in Afghanistan. The British India extended well into Afghanistan, but the reality is that the British only ruled Afghanistan on paper maps back in Europe. The reality on the ground is that they did not control any land they weren't standing on. When the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 1980s, they had an equally tawdry experience. We funded the Mujahideen against them, and the Soviets departed quickly in disgrace, as they were unable to subjugate the Central Asian country. Afghanistan is one of those places that you cannot conquer. Afghanistan is one of those places that you cannot rule. It is always going to be self-ruling. The people that are there want to do their own thing, and as much as we do not like how the Taliban treats women or people or enforces religious law or all this type of thing, that is their heritage, that is their culture, that is their religion, and that's what they want to do. And the idea that we in the West can be so bold as to enforce our value system on another country like that with the fear of death is arrogant at worst and hubris at best. And so, as much as the optics of it were not good, and a lot of people wonder what the future of our policy in the Middle East might be, I have to say getting out of Afghanistan was a good idea. And honestly, after spending most of the 21st century at war, it's nice for us to no longer be having mass troop movements, on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan, actively sending soldiers to war, and being able to sort of recover economically, financially, militarily from these long wars is important. But unfortunately, given geopolitical situations, our withdrawal from Afghanistan is not going to lead to a lot of rest. In fact, which leads us to the other news story that happened a couple weeks ago, the infamous submarine deal. As many people will remember, relations between the U.S. and France could be better. It's not so good. The French are not happy. And why are the Frenchies not happy? I'll tell you. The Frenchies are not happy because they were all set to sell Australia some diesel-electric submarines. And the UK and the United States decided to offer Australia something very special, and that was nuclear submarine technology, which the US doesn't really sell to anyone. And they have decided to sell it to Australia and build these submarines. And so the Australians picked the nuclear subs over the diesel-electric French subs, and so ended France's submarine deal. The French are unhappy, and they've withdrawn their ambassador from the United States. And they are perturbed that they were not consulted as a part of this this submarine deal. Now, the big thing about that deal, regardless of the French being mad about their subs, who cares? Um, the the big kind of struggle with that deal is that um, having another nuclear armed power in the Pacific begins the process of creating a counterweight scenario with China. That's something that we have encouraged Japan to become because of geography. Japan, China, very close. But also being able to work with Australia as well creates a new security environment in the Pacific Rim area and in the Oceania region that signals to me that the Biden administration is already looking at China as a geopolitical problem against whom we must begin to prepare now. So that's why I say, although we're withdrawing from Afghanistan and we need some time to recover, we're not going to have a lot of time. There's much to do considering the instability factor in China, which also gets into something I'll be writing about on my new Substack. Substack, CameronJournal.substack.com. I'm doing business and political trends, talking about stocks, a lot of economics, all that type of thing. So if you're into that sort of thing, my Substack is going to be free till the end of the year. All of my content is going to be free till the end of the year. After that, the content is going to be behind a $5 a month subscription or $50 a year. And then I'll have like a Friday column that will be released for free. So I'm still experimenting with Substack. Right now I'm just kind of writing my content as I've kind of always done. Like I've just kind of, written what I write, all this type of thing. But Substack is more of kind of a newsletter service. So I'm experimenting with different content ideas and maybe including some news stories and all this type of thing. So we're looking forward to that. But now's a great time to start the Substack. I have content every Monday and Friday. And like I said, it's all original and it's exclusive to that platform. That content is not anywhere else. It's not in any of my newsletters. It's not going to be on the CameronJournal.com. It's exclusive. So if you like business and political trends and you're not maybe so interested in the travel stories or the writing stuff or the videos that I post or music or anything like that, and you just want straight business and politics, straight no chaser, CameronJournal.substack.com is for you. Speaking of that, and I'm going to be talking about this, not only is China geopolitically unstable in the Pacific Rim region, but there's also some economic things that are quite worrisome. There's kind of two things happening right now. One is that China's having an electrical shortage. Today, the government advised Chinese power companies to get supplies to make electricity at all cost, and they literally did mean at all cost. The other one is they're having, irony here, a residential property crisis. So there's this company named Evergrande in China who was a broker of many apartment buildings throughout the entire country of China, and people often would buy these apartments to rent out to people or as investment properties. So many of the middle class in China, rather than just having the apartment where they live, will also have investment properties. Well, wouldn't you know, Evergrande way over leveraged themselves, and now they have a terrible debt problem, and they're waiting for a government bailout. Turns out even totalitarian regimes have the same problems that we do. And so they're now trying to figure out what the exposure to the rest of the banking system is from this real estate firm. A lot of people have already compared it to Lehman Brothers from 2008. A lot of people are wondering how bad could it get, and will the Chinese be honest about the problem that they have? So between the power outages and the debt leveraging in China, the Chinese definitely have their own share of issues that could potentially be destabilizing. If China should withdraw into a recession, that will have global consequences. And obviously, China's not very popular right now. You may have heard of this thing called like COVID-19 or whatever. It's been around in the air, all this type of thing. Obviously, with the lab leak hypothesis, getting some getting some traction, and the fact that the pandemic started in China and then quickly spread to the rest of the world. This has made difficult times for China from a national brand perspective. If China does end up having a terrible debt crisis and this company does fall apart, or the debt becomes toxic and investors start to flee, or there's massive power outages that also cause problems, that's going to damage China's brand further, and it's going to make people hesitant to do business with and in China. So there's definitely some things going on there that could be of concern. So if you're looking, for kind of something to keep an eye on, I would definitely keep an eye on that. I have two stories I'm going to finish up with, but before then, I want to dash through the pandemic a little bit. When I did my last weekly news podcast in April, we were just ramping up on vaccinations. In fact, I was not vaccinated yet. I got vaccinated like around my birthday's the end of April. Like around my birthday, I got vaccinated, and then I got my second shot in the middle of May. The first vaccination gave me some fatigue. The second one, I had no symptoms at all. I had Pfizer, and I got it through the University of Washington here in the Seattle area. So we've had this whole huge political debate. My throat's a bit dry. Oh, there we go. This huge political debate in this country over the summer about who's going to get vaccinated, who's not going to get vaccinated, all this type of thing. To some degree, we've reached the threshold of people that actually want to get vaccinated. So in April, when I did my last show, we were kind of just at the beginning, and we led the world in vaccinations. We're now 36th. How the mighty have fallen, and it hasn't taken long. There's a lot of people who have a lot of hesitancy and nervousness around the vaccine. And as I've discovered, even in my own friend circle, I've discovered a lot of people who are vaccine hesitant or just flat out refusing to get it at all. I've been also jousting on Instagram and posting these to Twitter from a guy named Mike Cunahan, who has an Instagram account called No Donuts Here. He's a workout bro. I enjoy his workout content. I've been getting back into lifting and working out and all this type of thing. I used to power lift, and I quit 5 years ago, and 6 years ago now, actually. And so I've wanted to kind of get back into that and all that sort of thing. And so I enjoy his lifting content. I think his products are cool and all that type of thing. But his whole idea that, well, if the vaccine works, I don't have to get it, and it's all about my freedom and I should have the choice not to do it, is a bit daft. And we've been going back and forth. And if you want to see those, head over to my Twitter. I post them. Bits of our conversations are interesting. The other day when he was talking about freedom, and I was arguing that sometimes in a free society, we have to do things for the collective good, I quoted the preamble of the Constitution, which has lots of collective language. In fact, it uses words like union and common good and public good 3 times in as many sentences to kind of show where the founders' heads were at when they were writing the Constitution. And he did not respond to that message at all. But I found other people that are vaccine hesitant, and I've done what I can to convince them. But I can't help but notice that a lot of people don't have an issue with vaccines in general. They have an issue with this vaccine. I think because it's come out so quickly. Vaccines normally take years, decades to do. It's come out so quickly, and the messaging on COVID has been so mixed up. And by the end of the summer, we were not doing masks for a while. Now we're back to doing masks. We weren't having restrictions. Now we're back to having restrictions. All this type of thing. The messaging has been so poor that at this point, people don't really trust anything that the government says. And so when the government says, oh, you should get this, you should get this shot, all this type of thing, people are hanging back. That also doesn't even begin to mention the massive amounts of disinformation that have also, happened online about the vaccine. including one this week where people were talking about how Norway has reclassified COVID-19 as a common cold, and that's not true. It was actually fact-checked by Newsweek, and what Norway had said is that they consider it now a seasonal respiratory virus that they will have to mitigate every year, like the common cold or the flu. They didn't say it was a common cold or a flu, they just said, we're going to have to be managing this for a while. And that's kind of what the Europeans are at, is that they've done the most that they can do with mitigating the worst parts of COVID, and now with high vaccination rates, they're able to return to normal life unless you get a breakthrough case or you're unvaccinated, and then, you have to quarantine at home. Like back in the day, if you got measles, you had to stay home. Kind of same situation. And so, it's a difficult thing for me who, read about the vaccine. I watched videos on YouTube. I looked at other people's experiences. I have asthma personally. I was worried with something that affects the respiratory system, what the side effects would be, because for me it could be deadly. I listened to other people's experiences. I asked around, and then ultimately I pulled the trigger on it, and I decided to get vaccinated. It was not without consideration that I got vaccinated. It was not without a lot of thought and talking to people. I was nervous. And so I understand where a lot of people are coming from, but ultimately getting vaccinated is the best thing that you can do, not only for yourself, but society as a whole. If more people are vaccinated, the less places the virus has to go. The less places the virus has to go and replicate itself or mutate, the less COVID that we're going to have. And as we've seen with the Europeans, when you start getting vaccination rates in the 70s and 80s, the number of COVID cases drop off dramatically. And then you can manage COVID-19 like cold and flu season rather than being in a crisis position as we are in currently. And so I've been doing my part to encourage people to get vaccinated, but I still have some friends who are not so enthusiastic. So I think we're caught up on all the summer. Like we've hit the high points. So I wanted to go over kind of two stories to wrap up the podcast. I usually do about an hour. We're gonna have 45 minutes today, but like I said, we're gonna be back every week now, so we'll have plenty of time to talk, chat, cavort, hang out, and I'll have less personal updates next time. So that'll save us a good 10 minutes. I saw on my feed today that Carl Nassib, he is a football player for the Raiders. He is the first gay football player to be an active player in the NFL. And he had an interesting statement about how he thought it was, he was nervous about coming out. And he's 28, and he discovered his homosexuality when he was 24. And he said he was worried about opening up about his sexuality, and it could cost him his job. And he basically waited to be financially secure and to be more secure in his career before he came out, and also kind of learned more about his teammates and figured out people would be supportive or whatever have you. And he said that it being the only out gay guy in the NFL is a little bit stressful, but things have gotten easier since. And apparently he's dating. And the reason I wanted to kind of bring this story up is because we need to getting gay marriage through was great, good progress. We've come a long way in our acceptance of homosexuality in society, but the reality is that, nobody, even a professional sports player, should be in a situation where they have to wonder if they're going to lose their job or be, blacklisted from the NFL for coming out as gay. I remember what happened to Michael Sam, who's black, and he came out during the combine. He got drafted by St. Louis, which is now in LA. And they had him on the practice team, and then no one ever hired him after that. And he was an okay football player. He wasn't great. He wasn't Tom Brady, Brett Favre, anything like that. He was okay. And ultimately nobody hired him, and his NFL career kind of ended right there. And so, and we also saw what happened to Colin Kaepernick. Like he came out, he began his protest, all this type of thing, and then promptly got, was basically, put out of the NFL. So, there's still a lot of social progress to come when it comes to sexuality, political affiliation, all this type of thing, particularly in sports. I mean, we recall a couple years ago all the angst everyone was having about, keep politics out of sports and all this type of thing, and keep sexuality out of sports and keep it quiet and all this type of thing. And the reality is that not only is Mr. Nassib out and proud, it would appear, but he's also doing very well. He's already had 1.5 sacks, and he's played in all 3 games the Raiders have played this season, because football has just gotten started. So it goes to show that just because your sexuality is one way doesn't mean you can't be good and effective. And if anything, it highlights the fact that we need more worker protections for sex and sexuality, because you can still be fired for being gay in this country. So that's a place where we still need to innovate, and it's a place where we still need to move ahead socially as a country to realize that no matter if you're gay, straight, whatever have you, we're all people. We're all human. And that's what really matters. And that's what's important. And hopefully the story of Carl Nassib will show us that you can be out and still play great football. Because here's the reality. There've already been gay players in the NFL. They just came out after they retired. So the fact that he's still in the league and out, we've crossed an important bridge. So the last story that I want to talk about, and then we're going to be done, is, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's interesting, but we're going to summarize it real quick. In The Atlantic right now, there is a great story called Hillary Clinton. We are in the middle of a constitutional crisis. And as I said, I'm not going to read this whole thing because it is long. It is super long. But I encourage you to go read it because Secretary Clinton draws a straight line from the right-wing news talk radio and conspiracy theories of the 90s and draws a straight line to our constitutional crisis of today and how, a lot of the country got duped by these right-wing charlatans. And I, growing up Republican, as my longtime listeners know, and growing up on a Saturday of AM radio, am very familiar with Michael Savage, Michael Medved, Rush Limbaugh when he was alive, all these sort of right-wing talking heads, kind of super familiar with them and all this type of thing. And so like there's a lot of information, and I use that word loosely, big quotey fingers if you're watching the live stream, false information that goes on right-wing AM radio. One of the innovations of Donald Trump that a lot of people didn't understand is that Donald Trump trafficked in the same conspiracy theories that have been going on right-wing radio for 20 years. There's a lot of things he said that I'm kind of like, oh yeah, Rush Limbaugh's been saying that since like 1998. Oh yeah, Michael Medved's been trying to make that argument since like 2002. And so that was one of the reasons why people glommed onto him, is that he was giving that validation of he was a politician who is speaking the same language of people who've had their heads filled with this for a long time. And it's basically led to a power struggle and a constitutional crisis between two basically factions of the country that have a completely different view of the world and are working on completely different amounts of information and have a completely different view of government, society, everything. And what's even more weird is the vast majority of the population is somewhere in the middle, but the factions are the loudest. And so her whole thing about the constitutional crisis and seeing this connection between what her and Bill experienced in the 90s from right-wing radio to what we're experiencing today is a very interesting perspective. It's really fascinating. Head over to The Atlantic and give it a click and definitely read through it because, like I said, it's long, so I'm not going to read through it all now. But like I said, her line of thinking is really interesting. She goes through the history of it. It's written by Christian Paz. It's super good. I encourage you all to read it. So that's the podcast. If you're listening to the audio version, you're going to get an outro. But if you're on the live stream, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Cameron Journal podcast. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week. I am looking at making Thursdays the permanent live stream day. I did a poll on Twitter and people were saying like it was like evenly split between like Tuesday and Thursday. And so given my schedule, I think Thursdays are better for me. But I'm not going to promise that yet. So keep an eye out on my social media. Every time I do something with the schedule, I put in big capital letters programming note. Like if I'm going to skip a week because of my schedule or my mental health, or if I'm moving something around on a different day, I put it on social media to let everybody know. So, but I'm thinking Thursdays are going to work. I'm liking the Thursday schedule. I think everybody else is going to like the schedule. I kind of like this time. So I might push a little bit earlier for my East Coast listeners because I didn't start this until 7 and I meant to start really around like 5 or 6. So I might get a little bit earlier, but I think Thursdays are going to work. So let me know on social media if you like Thursdays or if you don't. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week. And make sure to catch me on Twitter at Cameron Cowan, Facebook.com/Cameron O. Cowan, or at CameronJournal.com. We have new posts daily. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great night. Bye-bye.